So we last left off in our duck hunt game where we have our ducks or circles flying in, respawning, so a basic state happening within the enemy. So we're going to work on adding some more to this project. And what we're first going to do is we're going to learn how to make a button, and then we're going to end up bringing these other classes and some of this code into our game as we see how we can work with it. So what I'm going to do first is start out in a new project. So I'm going to make a new one, and in this we're going to just start out, put some comments at the top, and we'll be adding more things to our project as it progresses. So of course we need our standard functions of setup and draw. And could I just start with the existing project and add to it? Absolutely I could, but it's also just good practice when you're first learning to repeat. I know I sound like a broken record there, but this is something that is good to get used to. And we'll just go and choose different background color, paste that in. Alright, now I can run my project and we're up and running. So we have a basic project. So what I want to do is I'm going to create my button as a separate class, because when I do that I can encapsulate a lot of the logic into it, such as pressing the mouse and layout, position, etc. So I'll click on my section here, add a new tab, and I will make my class button. And remembering every class has our 3 items. Our properties are constructor and our methods, so we'll define out some of the properties we figure we'll need. It's a display object, so it's something we see on screen, so then it probably is going to need an X, Y, and a width and a height. We'll give it a color property so we can maintain and change color through the different states of the button. And we'll have a second color. This will be our text color. And then we'll need some text underneath the button, because we have a text color, so that means by default we'll also have text. So we'll have that, and 2 more properties we need. One is going to be our state. What is the state that the button is in? Right now I'm going to define my state and store that information in a string. In other programming languages we might set up a constant for it. Doing that is a little bit of extra work. We have to write out some additional things if we wanted to make constants. So it's the same way that when we use the text align command and then we just put it in all capital letters, left, right, center. It's the same kind of thing where we can define a constant. In this case we'll just store ours in a string. And then finally, I'm going to have a Boolean. I'll call it activate. So this is, it will be set to false, but when I press the button, I want to change that Boolean to true. So we'll be able to listen for that or look for that particular item. And now we have our constructor. Now in our constructor, we're going to pass in some parameters here. We're going to pass in location, and we'll pass in the text that we want to actually have so that we can make different buttons for our different states, so we provide different instructions. We can just have that attached to the button. I mean, we could separate out the text and put the text into the state information, and then it would just be fixed, but I want a little caption text that changes with the different states of the button to be part of the button. So with that, and I will pass in this parameter as a string, and we'll give it a value of, or a name, we'll call it BT for button text. And then I am going to pass in my starting X position. Actually, we'll just follow the same naming we did before, BX and BY. So now what we can do is define these. So we say X is equal to BX. Move my cursor so it's not in the way. Y is now equal to BY. Width, I'm going to set this equal to 100. That'll be a decent sized button. Y will be equal to 100 as well, so it's round. Then our button text will be equal to BT. So we've passed that in. Now we can define our colors. So my base color for my button, I'm going to make all of my buttons when they show up on screen, I will just go for this nice purple color right there. And you can make your color whatever you want. And then my text color will be equal to color. And this time I'm going to go for a darker version of that. We'll copy that. Paste that in. And now we have our state. Our button is going to start out in a state of up. So notice, I listed the states that I'm working with. So it's a good idea when you have a state variable that you're working with, and I'm trying to store this, as I make reference to that with a simple comment so I know which ones I'm going to be using later. Notice when we reference the state, we do put it inside quotation marks. If it was a constant, we could just type it without the quotes, but because it's not, we have to use that. And then finally activate starts out as false. So it's a little longer constructor, and we're passing in parameters, which we haven't done much of before. So this is, some new stuff here, but it's good to learn and start practicing, because it's pretty normal that functions take parameters when we pass things into them. And now our button is going to have an update method. And it's going to have a display method. And notice I am putting the closing comments on things. I didn't put one under constructor. It's the only thing in that section, but I could, just to be complete, put that in. So there's a lot of ways that we can go about figuring out, how we want to deal with the state, what we want to put into it, how we want to handle changing states. It's a good practice to separate the changing of the state logic into its own function. So we'll probably end up doing that as well. So we separate that out, because when we start having functions doing multiple things, it starts getting harder to decipher the code. It's usually easier to break things down into individual functions. So a function does primarily one task, even if that task is to perform some logic and then call a bunch of other functions. So we'll go for the easy one, the low-hanging fruit right now. And we'll just choose a fill color for C. And then We'll draw our ellipse at x, y with height. And then we'll change our fill color to our text, C. And then I will do my text align. And this is where we get to use a constant. Notice how it turned purple. We didn't have to use quotes. If we get more advanced at some point, maybe we'll look at doing constants, but we don't really need to right now when we can just store it as a string. Okay, so we have our color, we have our alignment. Now we want to set our text size. It's a good practice before you write any text in your program is you always just set the color, the alignment, and the size, because you never know where else it's been changed unless your entire program only uses one color, one alignment, and one size. But if they don't, it's just good to do that so you don't get things showing up in weird places. Now I set up text, and this is where I will display my button text. And we'll put it at X. And then we're going to shift it down, so it's going to be Y plus half of the width. So we know that half the width is 50, so it's now putting at the bottom, and then we just need to go down because we're saying where is the baseline for the text. So then I go down for 36, like that. If I do that, that sets that up. All right, so we're going to take care of update and changing the state and doing all of that in a little bit. But first I want to get my button working. We may also want to set some stroke weight and things on here as well if we need to take care of that. But first we can go. So we now need to define out our button. And I'm just going to give my name button start because we're going to have multiple buttons. We'll probably set up a unique button instance for each state of our program so that we can customize their text and location based on the state, so we have a lot of flexibility with where we put them in our project. Now, what we can do is just go button start equals new button. And now we define where do I want this button to show up on screen and what do I want it to say. So I have to remember the order of the parameters. And now when I'm here, it doesn't help me very much. It's not giving me good information until I go here. Oh, and it's telling me that constructor doesn't exist because we want a string, an X, and a Y. So if I set up my string here, click me, and then I'll go width divided by 2, height divided by 2, like that. No more red, it went away. And now we can just go button start dot update button start dot display. Now our update's not doing anything, but we will be doing something with it, so we might as well just put that in now and be done with it. And okay, our text showed up, but we have a few things wrong here. And this is why before we get too complex, we go and investigate. And let's see, X, Y, width, and Y. Whoops. Change that to height. Save that. Let's try and run it again. And now we can see we get a button showing up here. And it says, click me. Okay. I'm going to change this from click me. I'll just say click to play. Let's run this. Verify it's still working. Excellent. So with that, we need to now add some more state information into this. So I want to know when my mouse is over this, so I want to change its color so it highlights, and when I press the mouse button, I want it to change again. So to accomplish that, what we want to do is define what's happening inside our update. So to do that, we're going to start out inside our update, and we want to store what is the current mouse position when we call update. So we'll just go float our mouse location is equal to the distance. Remember, processing has this great distance function. So mouse x and y, x comma y. So the distance between where the mouse is and in the center of this object. So we want to know what is that distance. Then what we can do is just simply go and do an if statement, and we're going to do this if for our three states. So we're trying to figure out our states. Now, when we look at the states, we have up, over, and down. So up is when the mouse is not on it. It's the most generic state. When the mouse is over this, it's now more specific. That's triggering that event. And when it's down, that means the mouse has to be over it and the mouse is being pressed. So that's getting more specific. So when we're doing this, we have to go from most specific to most generic or least specific. So what we do is go if our mouse location value, so that's the distance the mouse is from the center of the button, is less than our width divided by 2, and 2 ampersands, mouse pressed is equal, double equal sign, because when we're asking the question we use 2 equal signs if we're assigning a value. So when we assign a value like we do in our constructor, single equal sign. But in a conditional, when we're asking that question, we use 2 equal signs. So if the mouse location is less than, so that distance is less than half, and the mouse pressed is true. Now what we can do is we want to change our state. So as we go to change the state, what we want to do is separate this out so that our update here is just looking for the mouse, and then it's going to call our change state. So we're going to change our state to down. Now it gives me an error message, change state doesn't exist. Well, that's easy enough to fix here. So we'll make our method for that, and it's going to accept a string that we passed in, that parameter we passed in what state we want to change to. And then we can work with that. So then we can just simply go state is equal to s here. So now we're going to work on changing that state. In our state here, we'll just simply say if state equals double equal sign up, else, and I'm going to just do a little copy paste here, paste, paste, because currently we have up, over, down, and then we can do that. So we have up, over, down. So now if our state is up, we have our 2 colors here, so color and text color, so we'll just copy that from there. That is our generic state, paste that in, and we'll just paste that in and then change the values, trying to simplify some of the typing. Command or Control T to clean up our indents or our alignments. It's a good practice to get into that. If you haven't saved recently, now is probably a good time. So now I want to change. So this is my base button color was something like this. When I roll over it, I'm going to make it get brighter. So we'll copy that. So paste that color in, and we'll make the text color. And all these colors, as we work with them, find colors that work for your artwork, for your background, and for your sensibilities. Now when I press the button down, I'm going to I'll choose and do my text color first since it's already in the darks, and then I want to paste that in. So kind of red, purple, blue. So we have up, else if over, else if state is down, so that changes those colors for it. So now what we can do is continue our logic up here and say, so this is if the mouse is over it and we press it. Then we have else if get rid of the mouse pressed. Now we are just simply looking for the when the mouse is over it. And then finally, so every other situation is going to simply be change state up. So when the mouse is not over it, or when the mouse is not over it and the button is pressed, then our button will just simply be in its up state. So now if we run it, let's see what happens. I roll over and I can see, well, that pink text really doesn't work, and I press and it now turned blue. So let's go and copy that and change for my over state. We'll change my text color. Paste that. Now let's run it and see what happens. That works better. We can see how they both go. So now we have been able to create a button. We've been able to change its state based on what is happening with the mouse. The nice part is I could make any number of buttons, give them all unique text and positions depending on what I need on a given screen. Now you could customize your button more beyond that. You could even customize it so when you create it, you can set different widths and heights. You could just customize it, with as many things as you want. Now the final thing that we haven't taken care of is adding in making activate true. So that's where when I am over it and the mouse is pressed, so we'll say activate equals true. So activate is true when I press that button. Now we don't have any logic in our main program to deal with it yet, but we will be putting that in shortly. So now is a good time to save. Our button for now is mostly done. We may need to do some tweaks to it, but for the most part, we have our button class situated. So again, keeping in mind that after the constructor in our methods, our update method is just simply checking where's the mouse in relation to the button and then changing states appropriately. Our display method is showing it on screen. All it does is handle the visual representation. And our change state is where we're now changing the properties based on what is happening whenever we are changing the state in our project. So we're separating things out, and if you get in the practice of doing that, it makes your code so much easier to read and follow, and will save you lots of headache down the road. So now what I want to do is I want to, inside my main program here, this is where I want to now start putting in some basic logic for how my project is going to function. So we're going to work with some of the things from the previous project. So we'll either copy those class files over or just make new tabs and paste them in and reuse them that way. So there's lots of ways we can do that. But what we do need to do is we need to then add in our states to our game, and we'll add in a countdown timer, we'll add in the player and the enemy, and then move through our different states.